Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome. This is, look, I'm already stumbling and I just started. I'm stumbling because normally I do this live commentary in the naturally conscious community, and then I publish the video over on YouTube. But this week I decided to switch things over. So for those of you that don't know who I am Tigria Gardenia. I'm a nature-inspired mentor and a certified life coach. I'm also a world ambassador for plant advocacy, and that's really the crux of what we're going to be talking about. So every Friday, I do live commentary on plant-related research, articles, new discoveries, more from the perspective of plant intelligence, plant consciousness, critical plant studies, plant humanities, all those things about plants as persons, plants as beings, plants as friends and allies and such. So today we're going to be talking about some plant research. Now, mind you, I actually spent the last probably 2 hours, I think it was total, going through all of my list of future papers and articles and essays and opinion pieces that I want to go through. And oh my goodness, what an explosion. So if you go through into my, on my website, on my blog, and even here on YouTube and in the Naturally Conscious community, you will see that I have been doing this for a while. I started off in papers from 2006 because the whole point was to give you an opportunity to sort of translate into kind of regular terms a lot of these amazing articles and academic papers that are coming out. They tend to be very technical. They have a very specific language, and I really enjoy being able to kind of translate, be an interpreter of those, but more importantly, opening a discussion for us to have, because many of the really interesting discussions are happening behind closed doors, but also through kind of like a very narrow lens. Here we have a really open lens, right? We can look at it from a scientific perspective. We can also look at it from a spiritual perspective and from an artistic perspective. So we're bringing in all the different ways of looking at it and really including the plants in our discussion. I mean, plants really are at the center of everything that we're talking about. So if you've never seen any of these plant commentary before, I encourage you to just go and find some of the archives, go look at them, because we have been doing some amazing papers over the last few years. And in particular, we went through the entire discussion of plant consciousness. We went through an entire discussion around what it means for personhood, because there is still a lot of controversy in the academic as well as scientific world. There's a lot of discussion as to what do some of these terms mean, and do we have to redefine them if we want plants to fit inside of them? And so we started in 2006 talking about 2006 in the perspective of the papers. We're mainly from about 2006 when we started, and now we're almost caught up to real time. So right now, the papers and essays and articles that I'm going through are usually between 2016 onward. And in 2023 in particular, there is a burst of discussion. So I'm really looking forward to us getting there. But before we get there, we still have a few things to go to. So today we're going to be talking about a paper that I actually just discovered. And it's interesting when I kind of discover things out of the none, because I go digging deep. So this is a 2016 paper. It is called Plant Research, which is really weird in the sense that it's just named that way. I cannot, for the life of me, I'm trying desperately as I'm looking through it to understand where exactly it got published. It's not extremely clear. It's just interesting that it comes from the philosophy department at the University of Poland. Hold on, let me just share my screen so that you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. Mind you, this is a new platform for me. Thank you, StreamYard, that I'm testing out to look at it. Normally, I use other systems. So let's actually, we'll start with this one for right now, just because this is pretty big in the way that it's set up. Okay, so as you can see, this is chapter 9, which means this is probably part of a bigger book. I'll go digging through at some point. Normally, I have it all set up already, but today, it just kind of caught me with the whole trying to figure out the new way of streaming this. I didn't really look it up. Hold on, let me look it up real quick for you because it just makes sense. We're already here. So nope. All right. This is going to be hard. This is what I don't like about papers that have generic names. When they have generic names, it looks like this is in some kind of gender-based, gender/nature based publication. And so we'll just do some research and see if I can figure out. I'm sure that this is in academia. But of course, when I'm looking it up with all of you watching, it kind of, okay, I found it. Finally. Okay, so it is in a publication called Gender Nature. It came out, like I said, in 2016. This chapter addresses issues such as the history of plant knowledge within a Western context, the specificity of plants' bodily function. Okay, now I found it. And this is really from an associate professor in the philosophy department at the University of Poznan in Poland. So we're going to get it. I love the other thing I love about doing the other thing I really love about doing these types of critical studies is the fact that in researching this, we really get a very broad perspective around the world, where there is a lot of research happening in Australia, for example, and a lot of really interesting kind of out of the box thinking around art and the role of art of plants in art and plants in cognition and many other aspects. There's some interesting things that are happening in the United States and in Canada. And then there's this kind of worldwide phenomenon. So normally when I do these papers, I never know exactly where the people are going to be coming from. So this, as I said, is Poland. By the way, as we go through these, please feel free to add your comments. Let me know where you're coming in from. Let me know also, if you have any questions or if there's things that I get wrong. To be honest, I have been studying all of these types of papers for the last 12 years. Nope, 13 years. But at the same time, it's still a lot of material. I am more breadth than I am depth in certain areas, even though I do have a master's in plants, social innovation, and design. And so there are a lot of different things. So I welcome your feedback. I welcome your input into how, whether or not this makes sense to you. Does it resonate? Are there questions? Did I even pronounce things right? Because by the way, a lot of words around here, I'm not going to pronounce right. So anyway, let's just dive into this paper. And I don't know, let's see if I can move myself. Can I move myself around? No, I can only put myself there. I'm trying to figure out exactly how I can move myself around this page. We'll try it this way. And if it doesn't work, if it's still too small, you let me know and I'll make myself a little bit smaller. Okay, so like I said, this is just called Plant Research. It's by Monika Bakke, which is an associate professor at the philosophy department. And so here is where we are going to go into this. So I already start with fiddling around. Plants have always been integral to the survival of humans, but for plants, we are simply one of many external pressures that increase or decrease their chances for survival and reproduction success. So this is a quote that comes from Chamovitz. Chamovitz from Israel has a laboratory that in reality, most people who are interested in plants have probably heard because he's the one that is the leader of or the head of the laboratories that have put out several studies that have come out in the last few years around pollination and plants, and in the sense that plants call in their pollinators through colors and scents and a few other different things. So showing the interaction between them. At the same time, Chamovitz is very much a naturalist in the perspective that he doesn't necessarily believe that plants are intelligent or that plants are using any kind of intelligence in order to do this. He's one of those people that awes and wonders and is amazed by everything plants do, but he believes that it's much more biologically driven rather than intention-based driven. And actually, I have a few papers queued up about the intention of these types of things. And I'm really actually excited because there is new research coming out that is showing intentionality. But see, this is another example, this particular quote of how Chamovitz really still looks at everything from the perspective of reproduction and survival. And there is honestly a whole series of different people who are, a lot of researchers are still focused in that paradigm. And this is where I think the arts, the traditional indigenous knowledge, which I did a really great opinion piece last week on this, and you can find that on my blog and also on YouTube and NCC. And this is really a great expansion that is happening in our definitions. But Chamovit's old school, and he really still believes. It'll be interesting to see how he feels about it now with all the research that his laboratory has done, because several years ago, he was still in that camp of plants are instinctual beings. Yes, they are alive. Yes, they have the ability to do amazing things, but they're doing it from a place of instinct rather than a place of thinking and decision making from a kind of consciousness perspective. So in the Western context, knowledge about plants has been put into practice by female and male gardeners, cooks, healers. I forget that this is in a paper, this is in a journal about gender, and gender, it looks like, will become a central. By the way, I don't read these beforehand. I tend to, I skim a little bit just to see if it would be appropriate, but I don't get into it because I'm always curious as to what the heck is going to come out of my mouth when I actually do read it. And that's what we're discovering right now. So I'm going to make this even bigger for you. So by female and male gardeners, cooks, healers, carpenters, perfumers, sculptors, musicians, and many others who knew what they wanted from plant bodies. Human existence relies on these peculiar bodies of indifferent beings. Indifferent beings. All right, I'm already not liking this part. I hope they're going to change their tune to this, because the idea of indifferent beings, I mean, I guess indifferent from the perspective of they are. Oh, we got into that conversation in one of our streams a while back. The fact of what is the definition of indifference. If I go with the definition we use here in Italy, and we use in Dominher in particular, indifference is a really positive thing. Indifference is like not being attached. And so that can be super positive. I wonder if that's what they meant by there. I guess we'll find out as we go. Indifferent beings who realize their own goals in life. Plants provide oxygen, food, and energy, fossil fuels. Really? That's the only kind of energy? Anyway. And they are humanity's best hope for depolluting the planet. Well, that and fungi. In Reproducing Plant Bodies on the Great Plains, American literary scholar Aubrey Streit Krug correctly states, plant bodies produce human bodies by materially constituting them, serving as producers in the food web, in which their role is to capture solar energy and transform it into the harvestable calories that allow human bodies to sustain life, to grow, and to reproduce. I like the fact that that puts plants in this very important position. And I think it's important for us, especially with all of the plant blindness going on in the world, to really recognize how fundamental it is that, you know, we work in harmony with plants, because it is plants that provide our sustenance and provide our ability to live, pretty much. Yet, by merely incorporating them as food, humans miss the most of the sophistication of plants as vigilant living beings perfectly equipped with survival strategies quite alien to us. I will agree with that. I will definitely agree with that. We are in agreement. Knowing plants for their own sake, inquiring into their ontological and epistemological status was, for ages, restricted to male natural philosophers. Just 3 centuries ago, it also became entrusted to male and female botanists, and more recently to plant biologists. Nowadays, we recognize in plants different sophisticated life forms with very peculiar bodies and lifestyles. I love this sentence. And not only do we want to learn more about them, but we also have much to learn from them. This is beautiful. Like this is beautiful. This is beautiful. That's a very true statement. That is a true statement. That is exactly where we're moving towards. We're moving towards an understanding that we want to learn more about them, but we also have much to learn from them. This chapter follows the troubled journey humans have taken to get to know plants in order to arrive at the present moment in time and space, and the current recognition of them as autonomous and intelligent beings about whom and from whom we need to learn. This is a story of denial and exclusion, as well as the twist and turn provided by women and men who, contrary to the omnipresent and overwhelming plant blindness, have contributed to the present recognition and rediscovery of plants in nature cultures. I'm already liking this direction. This is exactly where we want to be going. And this is much of what we need. We need this understanding and telling of these stories and rethinking of the relationships that we have and the stories that we have been telling, the false stories we've been telling of plants up until now. Plants have remained mostly unaddressed in feminist theories, despite the fact that humans become who they are with plants and that plant-embodied lives are necessary for sustaining human lives. And yet, plant lifestyles and bodies offer an inspiring array of morphological, metabolic, and sexual variety, most of which have not yet been fully explored outside plant biology. This is definitely true. Not only that, I feel like in this particular context, we are actually ourselves as human beings are limiting ourselves by not recognizing all of this variety of plants because we ourselves are not recognizing our own ability as human beings to embrace, is that the right word? To expand and evolve into more varieties, because we're limiting ourselves and we're looking at ourselves so myopically, and we're inhibiting our own ability to evolve into this wide range of morphological, metabolic, and sexual varieties. It's kind of happening a little bit now, but I think we're still not there. Although they share an evolutionary past with plants, humans rarely recognize them as life forms with whom they have anything in common. Hence, plants' slow and quiet lives are widely ignored in theory and in culture. Unfortunately, very true. Very, very true. Very, very true. And I'm so curious, if you're here and you're watching, how do you feel about that? Like where was the shift for you? Because obviously if you're watching something like this, you must be interested in plants as beings beyond just beautiful ornamental plants that just live in, your garden or something you completely control or in it at all. So I'm curious as to how your own plant reawakening came about. Like, where did you first start noticing that the plants around you, the plants that you were ingesting, the plants that you're wearing were more than just some inanimate or barely alive type of being, but they were actually beings with consciousness and intelligence on their own? I'm so curious. Let me know in the comments where. When considered within feminist theories, plants are most likely to be either viewed as undifferentiated non-human others or linked to, I just realized that this has to be moved, linked to historically grounded and well-functioning vegetal metaphors that often, but not always, reproduce gender stereotypes. Oh, we did a really great paper. This was a long time ago on ecofeminism, and that talked about, plants in critical gender studies. Oh, such a good one. Go check it out. It's really, really great. Where was I? Yet, in an expression of concern for non-human others, Australian ecofeminist Val Plumwood has called on us to recognize in their limitless heterogeneity beings who always outrun what we may know and want. It is in the context of this tension between knowing them more and wanting more from them that feminist scholars are now rediscovering plants, informed both by new discoveries in biology about plant behavior and by the growing interest in post-anthropocentric attitudes toward non-human life forms. Observations of plant lifestyles and peculiar body plans and modes of reproduction provide evidence that plants are autonomous beings, receptive, active, aware, and intelligent life forms gathering information, remembering, and adapting their behaviors accordingly. All this comes as a source of inspiration to post-anthropocentric efforts to attain what American biologist and feminist science studies scholar Donna Haraway calls multi-species eco-justice. suggesting that it is high time that feminists exercise leadership in imagination, theory, and action to unravel the ties of both genealogy and kin and species. Finding ways of including plants in feminist theories is both an urgent and exciting task that coincides with the emerging field of critical plant studies. I will also add, because as I was a long time ago, I've done a few papers on ecofeminist topics regarding plants and regarding nature in general. And there have been, for example, one on the feminist plant, which is the water lily. Great paper. So worth listening to it, because I think if you read it through by yourself, you can already garner some of it, but I think we had a really great discussion on it. And the thing that also is missing in all of this is that, remember, we as human beings, as Homo sapiens in particular, have about 200,000 years of evolution under our belt. Okay. Maybe you double or add to that, right? When you start to think about you add so much more to that when you start to go in the Homo species, like the Homo genera. But it's still not even close to the 470 million years that plants have been evolving, right? So if today the evolution of plants has taken us to a wide breadth of varieties of plant bodies, as they talk about, of gender type relationships, of all sorts. My camera just it was in the middle of it. All right, let's go back to that. If 470 million years has taken us through all of these different evolutions to a wide range of species, a wide range of genders, a wide range of body types, a wide range of functions, all of these different aspects, don't you think that we of humans, if we don't keep screwing around and get ourselves knocked off this planet, are going to arrive at the same place? That if we were to stop holding back our evolution of talents, of skills, of genders, of physiology, right? If we were to stop looking at everything as anything that is different is wrong, but instead embraced all of our weirdness and all of our rather than calling things disabilities, but instead looking at them as different abilities or diversely abled, don't you think there would be a whole boom of amazingness in human beings? Like all of these latent things that are closed off between us, all of these abilities that we have, all of this junk DNA and all of this brain power that we're not actually exercising right now. Isn't it possible that it would flourish, that it would bloom? Let's just use bloom for now, and come out in new and exciting ways. Don't you think that's possible? I think it's possible. I think it's possible. This chapter addresses issues such as the history of plant knowledge within the Western context, the specificity of plants' bodily functions, intelligent behavior and sensitivity in plants, their sex life, and botanical queerness. Technologically augmented plants, the future environments of plants on the earth and beyond, human plant ethics, and finally, the imperative to follow plants, that is, to look to plant lives for inspiration on how to coexist with them and with others. Aho! There we go. I'm here front and center for exactly this conversation. The first inquiries into plant life can be traced back to ancient Greece. So, what's the name of this chapter, of this section? Knowing plants. The first inquiries into plant life can be traced back to ancient Greece. And to some degree, we are still influenced by the Greeks' outdated convictions that plants are passive and insensitive beings occupying the lowest position among the living. Oh, isn't this so true? In his treatise, De Anima, Aristotle, who for the record, we do not like, because Aristotle was one of the first that put plants in the lowest rung of livingness with no consciousness and did not even open the discussion. It was like, nope, not interesting. And humans, being somewhat sheep-like characters when they want to be, followed along. So I blame Aristotle for so much. Anyway, put forth a concept that a soul is a system of abilities manifested by living beings ranging from metabolism, movement, and sense perception to reasoning. He distinguished three types of souls organized hierarchically and inherent to plants: non-human animals and humans. I just realized something that I haven't checked while I'm here, since, I should check this. Okay, there is that. I just wanted to double check that. Okay, I wanted to actually just realize that I had not looked at all at the at what was happening in on YouTube, and I just wanted to double check that everything was here and that everything was possible. And I also wanted to check the chat because I wanted to make sure that that was coming through too. So thank you for your patience while I do this. Okay. Excuse me. He distinguished three types of souls organized hierarchically and inherent to plants, non-human animals, and humans. Already just the fact that Aristotle separated out humans from non-human animals is just crazy, because we are animals. I don't understand this division. The nutritive and vegetative soul on the lowest, most basic level is attributed to all living beings. Understood as passive and insensitive beings. Do you understand now why I do not like Aristotle? Plants are unlike animals, which possess both a nutritive and perceptive soul. Based on a zoocentric bias, yes, Aristotle defined plants in terms of their lacking the abilities of animals and humans. Doesn't this tell you Aristotle's limitations? Seriously. The legacy of the vegetative soul has been analyzed by American philosopher Elaine P. Miller, who has demonstrated that 18th and 19th century philosophers and poets were interested in plant lives as an alternative to a dominant reductionist understanding of organicity. Is organicity a word? I didn't even know that word. Metamorphosis and indetermination and plurality have all been among the recognized features of vegetal lives, as well as the unfolding of the plant as the form that literary and philosophical creation and human subjectivity take. The concept of the vegetative soul resonates also in contemporary feminist approaches to subjectivity, as discussed later in this chapter. The Greek philosopher Theophrastus is considered the founder of botanical research in the West. He continued the work of Aristotle, but gave special attention to plants. Did he believe, though, that they were alive and, cognizant? Because if not, he's just as bad as Aristotle, and we're going to hate him too. Being more observant and enthusiastic about their sophisticated lives and body architecture, based on the principle of repetition, modularity, he recognized in them a colony rather than a single organism. Two of his books, Historia Plantarum and De Causis Plantarum, marked the beginning of botany. Unlike Plato and Aristotle, he avoided evaluating plants from a zoocentric perspective, choosing instead to deal with them on their own terms. All right, I'm already starting to like this guy. Good work, Theo. Good work, Theo. Plants were viewed as autonomous beings existing not only to serve humans. Yes. As British-born plant biologist Matthew Hall suggests, Theophrastus' studies led to the recognition that plants have their own goals in life. You go, Hall. We've also reviewed a bunch of his stuff, so you want to go back through and look at, Hall is great. Hall is great. Hall is super interesting in the way that Hall relates and conceptualizes and understands plants. However, it was an Aristotelian authority and not a Theophrastan way of seeing plants that dominated botanical studies over the next century. Oh yes, unfortunately yes. From the Roman natural philosopher Pliny the Elder to the Swedish botanist and zoologist Carl Linnaeus, who we have to thank to our wonderful reduced nomenclature that we use to identify plants that totally eradicated traditional ecological knowledge, all of the indigenous goodness of the world, and made it seem as if plants could be categorized in little tiny boxes, which, by the way, they can't. It just doesn't work. Medieval scholasticism adopted a hierarchical order for non-living matter and living beings in the form of the great chain of being, a concept of nature based on three principles, plenitude, continuity, and gradation of all existing forms of being. Really? Gradation. In this context, plants were situated at the very bottom of the living world. Lovely. Between minerals and animals, and hierarchically organized from the most superior, such as trees, to the lowest, that is, fungi, who are not plants, by the way, just in case there was any confusion there. Own kinhome, which at the time were counted as plants. I should read along. The modern rediscovery of plants coincided with the wide reception of the revolutionary taxonomic system of botanical classification developed by Linnaeus, that again totally wiped out all traditional ecological knowledge. I am not saying that Linnaeus is all bad. I mean, I can see the benefit of having some kind of classification system to help us in our human category label-based world, but come on, we have to admit that it's pretty limiting. It's pretty limiting. And it doesn't account for the fact that, especially in certain kingdoms, certain kingdoms are, including plants, have, what is the difference between an individual, not an individual, but a mutation that takes form and a whole new species? Oh, it's just, there's a lot to unpack there. There's still a lot. However, exploration and scientific travel also led to increased interest in exotic plants and their presence in European botanical gardens, hence stealing plants and moving them into non-native spaces. Linnaeus argued against the old way of classifying by strongly stating, we denounce as erroneous specific names that emphasize a similarity to another plant in herbage, fruit body, or habit, in Greek or Latin. Indeed, in the no, but it's okay to name them after the person that discovered them, discounting the fact that the plant was already in existence way before that, and that the plant was probably named by some other people. Indeed, in the pre-modern era, as indicated by the French philosopher Michel Foucault, the history of the living being was that being itself, within the whole semantic network that connected it to the world. In other words, a living being was characterized not only by its actual body features, but also by all sorts of old and new stories involving it, such as travel, medical, literary, and philosophical narratives. Linnaeus' taxonomy, however, offered a clear and easy-to-learn system focused solely on the visible features of the plant, but not even. It was based, yes, some of it. I mean, yes, okay, the full name. Fine. Okay, I'm going to stop harping on Linnaeus right now. Today, Linnaean taxonomical efforts are viewed as a reflection of the desire for epistemological mastery over human and non-human others that is typical of Western modernity. Yes. It appears that women enthusiastically joined in the botanical research of the 18th century, becoming involved in botanical illustration, the collecting and naming of plants, and translating and commenting on botanical texts, both as professional and as amateurs. Excuse me, I've got to shut something down right now. There's a little bit of confusion happening. Okay, excuse me. They were also translators of scientific texts that greatly helped the transmission of botanical knowledge throughout Europe. Women's enthusiasm for botany was generally accepted, but not completely free from controversy, as it was not obvious to everyone that botany was suitable for women. This is the past. Today we're in a present. We're moving toward a new future. I just have to keep reminding myself of that over and over again. As British literary scholars Sam George and Alison E. Martin point out in Botanizing Women, Transmission, Translation, and European Exchange, there were voices among male naturalists warning that botanizing girls, anatomizing the sexual parts of the flower, were indulging of acts of wanton titillation and doubting that an examination of plant organs of generation could be conducive to female modesty. Yes. Botany, however, became an outdoor pursuit that offered women limited freedom to investigate the natural world. But the more theoretical work, such as inventing systems of classifications, was reserved for male naturalists. Women wrote botanical text and also did a lot of the illustrations, often in more private and polite format of a letter, a confession, or a conversation that was viewed as more appropriate. I like it because Michelle says, because that was one of the few hobbies that were socially accepted for women. Exactly. Socially accepted, and therefore they can move into these directions. But yeah, right. Only in a very modest sense. Hence, during the Enlightenment period, botanical texts were written specifically for either sex. And at the same time, botanical texts by and for women gained visibility. The British naturalist and geologist Charles Darwin finally, I've never had anybody who felt the need to qualify who Charles Darwin is. I thought everybody knew who Charles Darwin is. Maybe not. Finally challenged the Aristotelian tradition of the hierarchy of souls, carried on through the centuries in the Christian concept of the great chain of being, and in artificial systems based on few conveniently chosen traits, such as the shape of a plant's reproductive organs in the case of a Linnean taxonomy. I think it's just a way for them to have focused on sexual organs without in a socially acceptable way. I think that's the way they used it. The key concepts for plants research in the new Darwinian opening, such as the movement of plants, plant cognitive abilities, the root brain, and the notion of common descent, are discussed later in this chapter. Okay, so the next chapter is called "What is a Plant?" Let's get there. Dealing with plant bodies on an everyday basis, all humans are very familiar with their smell, their taste, and the texture of their body parts. Yeah, it's called my clothing, my food, and my perfume. That's the way most people know what we're talking about when we talk about plants. People want to smell like flowers, like wood, like freshly cut grass. But as Russian-born philosopher Michael Martyr rightly notices, I didn't know Martyr was Russian-born. Oh, look, I learned something new. That explains why he is in the University of Basque. I was wondering that. The absolute familiarity of plants coincides with their sheer strangeness. Yes, that's a beautiful line. The absolute familiarity of plants coincides with their sheer strangeness. I think that's a beautiful poem in and of itself. That's it. Poem right there. Familiarity of plants. Coincision. Is that actually a word? I don't think that's a word. Sheer strangeness. Indeed, for a non-biologist, plant bodies may seem rather obscure. At a first glance, humans and plants do not really have much in common. However, according to American-born plant biologist Daniel Chabot, okay, wait a minute. No. There's something wrong here. Is he American-born? Now I have to go look up Chamovitz. Because he's in Israel. I just assumed he was I always assumed he was Israeli. I am going to need to look that up. So you're going to have to pause that thought. Daniel Chamovitz. I know he is the president of the university. Okay, but tell me Wikipedia. Let's see. He is American-born. How did I not realize he was an American-born plant geneticist? I guess I just assumed he was Israeli because he's in the university. Look at that. Never make assumptions. Look how bad that made me look. I was wrong. Okay. According to the American-born plant biologist, mind blown, on a broad level, we share biology not only with chimps and dogs, but also with begonias and sequoias. Not only, we share so much more. DNA structure, there is so much. Genome, there's so much. which indicates a common evolutionary past with plants. Yes, please. Animal and human animal lifestyles and body plans are very different, with the evolutionary path of plants and animals splitting some 2 billion years ago. The oldest plants are algae and mosses, which were followed by ferns and then needle trees, pine, like in the pine family, needle trees and leaf trees, while flowering plants were the latest arrival. Yeah, who knows what's going to come next? Super excited. Human animals share not only a common ancestry with plants, but also interconnectivity, co-adaptation, and co-evolution. And yet, we seem to forget this fact on a regular basis. American cultural theorist Richard Doyle claims if mammalian and primate evolution is enmeshed in a systemic way with angiosperms, which are flowering plants, so too have human and other primates been constantly constituted by interaction with plants. Hence why I keep saying that when you rediscover your inner plantness, you will be able to unlock a whole series of capabilities that come from that common ancestry. You will be able to recognize parts of yourself that have been lying dormant, that are connected to our innate sense of plantness. There is so much there for us to unlock about who we truly are by recognizing our inner plantness. And this is the science you need to prove it. But he goes even further to suggest that psychedelic compounds produced by plants and also by the human brain itself catalyze human evolution and technoscientific change. To evolve, one needs to be ecstatic, to experience deep interconnection with the ecosystem, to be more than oneself. Think about that for a second. In the 1960s, Lynn Margulies, another one we love, one of the most important American biologists to the 20th century, proposed a hypothesis of symbiogenesis. Sorry, Michelle, if you're still watching, but we're going to be talking about biocivilizations. Symbiogenesis. You need to finish the book. She will understand our Plant Wisdom book club just read a good book that not everybody loved, but that's okay. And that's the whole point of it. Now we're reading a pretty interesting book that's a poetry book, Tree Spirits, Grass Spirits by Hiromi, I think, Ito. Go look it up. It's awesome. And if you want to read along with us, we've just started. So you're more than welcome in the Plant Wisdom book club. Okay, sorry. American biology of the 20th century proposed a hypothesis of symbiogenesis to explain the symbiotic origin of plant, animal, and other cells containing nuclei. At first strongly contested, this theory is now widely accepted and confirmed by contemporary research recognizing plant cells as actually being chimeras, or how do we pronounce it in English? In Italian, it's chimera. In Spanish, it would be chimeras. I have no idea how we pronounce it in English, to be honest. They came into existence as a result of a symbiotic union between algae and cyanobacteria, aided by bacterial parasites. All of these are our ancestors, just so you know. All of these are our ancestors. Now, plant bodies come into a huge variety of forms and structures, the smallest being the unicellular aquatic algae and the largest being trees, the multicellular and vascular terrestrial organisms. Thus, on one side of the spectrum is the microscopic scale, and on the other are some of the largest life forms on Earth, such as sequoia trees. Plants also differ significantly in terms of their lifespan, from hours in the case of microscopic phytoplankton cells to centuries for some trees. Michelle tells me she likes the subject matter, not the book. But that's okay. It's okay. It's fine. You don't have to love it. But the subject matter is great. Got to admit that. Biocivilizations. Go check it out. Unlike animals, plants are autotrophs, feeding on non-organic matter and solar energy, with the exception of parasitic species. Plants feed on air, light, and minerals, and in doing so, provide almost all the organic carbons used by the heterotrophs, which are unable to, I was about to define it, but I just realized that they define it right here for us, so I didn't have to. Hold on. Move over. Who feed off of, who are unable to produce their own food. Plants' relation to the mineral world is not limited to their metabolism, absorbing minerals. It is also visible in their peculiar mode of body growth, resembling that of crystals. Resembling that of crystals. I love that they mention this. They love that they mention this because it is further proof that there are connections and that it's all alive. It's all alive. It's all alive. It's all alive and it's all in nature. Everything. Multicellular plants increase in size indefinitely by cyclically adding organs, modules, like crystal units in growing crystals. And crystals also have DNA, by the way. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. This proves to be very useful body architecture, as a new module may easily replace a damaged one. Modules, in contrast, may be morphologically and anatomically modified according to environmental conditions. And on an evolutionary timescale, modules may develop scientific functions. No, specific, not scientific. I was like, that doesn't make sense. Specific functions. This highly repetitive structure of the plant body has been known since the work of Theophrastus. Ancient Greece, we've known all these things. Through the ability to modify one's body in terms of metamorphosis was taken up by the German writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and characterized by an alterity inscribed into identity. This means that a plant has no strict identity over time in the way an animal does. I would argue that not even an animal really does, but that we again limit our evolution. And here's an interesting thought for you. While we tend to think that plants are slow and humans are fast and animals are fast, I would argue that on the evolutionary scale, it is way inverted, that humans are slow and almost at a standstill, mainly at a standstill, where animals are a little bit faster than that, and plants are way fast, way fast. And time is a human construct. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. The chat's always the best. Intelligent behavior of sensitive bodies. Sensitivity in plants has been known for a long time, and not only in the Western context, but the mechanisms of plants' responses were not known. The Indian scientist and inventor Jagadish Chandra Bose, another phenomenal person to study if you love plants. Seriously, it's a lot. Anyway, investigated plant response to various stimuli and made an important discovery that explains how plants such as Mimosa purtica, the sensitive plant, and Venus flytrap. Why do they put the scientific name of Mimosa purtica and then a Venus flytrap instead of putting Diomea? Sorry. Anyway, can move without any muscles. His claim that touch initiates an electric signal that causes a rapid movement was rejected by the Royal Society of London in 1901. Acting as a scientific authority, but later studies have demonstrated that Bose was correct. Bose was correct about a whole mess of things. In recent decades, the interest in and the understanding of plant behavior has increased greatly. The new science of plant behavior and signaling, still contested by some scientists, but enthusiastically welcomed by others, addresses various issues related to adaptive behaviors in plants. I would say intelligent behaviors in plants, but fine, including sensory perception, communication, memory, and intelligence. Plants are now considered sensitive and dynamic beings capable of responding to environmental stimuli such as touch, temperature, gravity, water, and chemicals in various ways. They can display rapid movement and, as in Mimosa's closing leaflets in its defense of the phoenix, or in defense, it's not just it is a defense. It's a defense. It's also a shyness. I'm going to go with that. Or the Venus flytraps catching animals and changes in their body shape and others. I I like this comment. I like this. And Michelle says, yeah, those London groups didn't like anything. It's so true. And yet the Theosophical Society and so many other things have a root. It's just, yeah, the Brits are weird. And I can say that as a good American who lives in Europe, but still. In 2003, Anthony Trowavas, another one we love, a plant biologist from the United Kingdom, caused a major controversy in the academic world by declaring the need to recognize plant intelligence. Ooh. See why I started the papers in around 2003 to 2006? 2006 really is the birth of plant neurobiology. And so if you go back through our plant all of this plant commentary, plant consciousness commentary, that's where we start kind of our adventure, because we need to lay a foundation. If you've never experienced any of this before and you don't know who any of these players are, most papers do a pretty good job of giving you the basics of who people like Trowavas, and we've talked about Martyr, and we've talked about Hall, and we've talked about Chamovitz. We're just missing Cahill and Mancuso and a few others, Galliano and Kimmerer. These are all names that you start to learn over time, that the names themselves are not as important. I mean, these are all important people. So yes, they are important. But what's really important is also their theories and their conclusions and their understandings rooted in the science and the deep connection with the plants. And that's the beautiful part. All of these people are not afraid anymore of saying, I am learning with and from plants. Natasha Myers also. Where am I? Which he defines as adaptive variable growth and development during the lifetime of the individual. I would say also adaptive intentional variable growth and development during the lifetime of an individual. That's the Tigria addition to it. He believes that the hostility towards the concept of an intelligent plant comes from a mindset common in plant scientists that regards plants basically as automatons. I would also venture my little aside, which many of you have heard me talk about before, but I have to say is, it is frightening as hell for us to recognize the true intelligence of plants, because when we recognize the true intelligence of plants, we have to redefine life and death. It's easy today for certain people, certain groups to get up on and say, we need to stop, for example, killing animals in some forest. Although I would say that we've all killed animals, because the spider, the mosquito, it's inevitable. But there's kind of an acceptance in those and a non-acceptance in other kinds of animals. But there's still this theory that says, thou shalt not kill, period, when it comes to animals. When it comes to plants, our whole discussion flips into completely different ways that we have yet to even talk about. And until we talk about that, there will be a whole grouping of people who dissect plants on a regular basis, a whole series of artists, which is another set of papers that I want to go through with you. All these artists that are creating art by literally killing plants on a regular basis and thinking, oh, how beautiful, I love plants. Do you? Do you really love plants? Do you really love plants if you are just cutting them up? If you cut kin up just for the sake of putting it into some kind of frame? We need to have that conversation. It's a hard conversation. There is no easy answers, and there is no preconceived kind of notions as to where we should go with this. We need to, though, have the conversation. We need to have the conversation. Okay. However, in recent years, scientists interested in plant signaling and behavior, aka plant neurobiology, but nobody wants to accept that term, have provided significant evidence that plants behave intelligently and that some decision-making is taking place in the roots. It was actually Charles Darwin, assisted by his son Francis Darwin, in The Power of Movement of Plants, who came up with the term root brain, though they compared it to the brain of a lower animal. What if we just get away from the whole brain thing altogether? I mean, what if we can just take plants for who plants are without having to think about them in terms of a human brain or an animal-based brain? Plants have a whole decentralized system, which is pretty damn freaking cool. So why can't we just focus on that? Why wouldn't that be enough? However, contemporary research finds the decentralized assessment and response system specific to plants more effective for their survival. Hence what I was just saying. We do not need to categorize plants with animal terms. We can allow plants to be the plants that they are. As Hall puts it, plants may actually have thousands of brain-like entities that are involved in the emergence of intelligent behavior. Hence why I keep telling you, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. Because when you inhibit and embody your inner plantness, that's what's going to emerge. The root brain is, in fact, a decentralized communicative network that is absolutely unlike the centralized and hierarchically structured self-supposedly governing our own body, our own animal bodies in particular. Oh, look, my professor gets named now. That's cool. Italian plant biologist Stefano Mancuso. That's my professor. My master's degree is under him. He's an interesting character, which I'm not going to get into. But one day, if you come to an interspecies, our interspecies community gatherings in the Naturally Conscious community, which happens on the third Wednesday of every month, I'll happily answer questions about Mancuso because he's a character. Oh, is he a character? Anyway. And science journalist Alessandra Viola. Alessandra Viola is super cool. She did besides the fact that she co-wrote the book that they're about to talk about, Brilliant Green, but also she did a very interesting presentation about plants and law and rights and laws and such, which was very, very, very interesting. I might review that for all of you too, because it might be a good one for us to listen to together. I explained that plants manifest a kind of swarm intelligence that enables them to behave not as individuals, but as multitude. The same behavior is seen in an ant colony, a shoal of fish, or a flock of birds. Quick aside, Mancuso has, and again, I'll tell you more the details of this in an interspecies community gathering, but Mancuso did a really fun experiment before they realized that that's how he was spending his money and they took away the funding, of putting a whole series of plants on these little carts that the plants could actually move around. And it is fascinating to see the swarm intelligence that came across from that experiment. He didn't even expect it, but he discovered, well, come to a gathering and I'll tell you about it. Okay. Do plants exhibit a form of consciousness then? Whereas Trowavas would give a positive answer to this question, Daniel Chamovitz thinks that such a statement goes too far in making parallels between plants and animals. Did I not tell you that at the very beginning? The first thing I told you at the beginning of this stream, when we read Daniel Chamovitz's first sentence about him, that's him. He does not believe plants are intelligent. He does not want to go there. Chamovitz prefers to talk about plant awareness. And how is awareness and subsequent action taken based on that awareness not intelligence? I have yet to figure out his argumentation on this for real. I have read his books. I have watched his how his laboratory presents things. I have seen him in action. I don't understand it. It's just a fear. Because thanks to their sophisticated sensual perception, plants are actually aware of the world around them. You think? And then they take action based on that. Isn't that what intelligence is? Right? Isn't that what intelligence is? Anyway. As well as of their past. He even accepts that they have memory. Memory, awareness, and decision-making. Basis of intelligence. These controversial ideas are already resonating in cognitive studies with Spanish and Dutch philosophers Paco Calvo Garzón. Paco's awesome. Paco, we love Paco. Go read his book, Planta Sapiens. And Fred Kaiser, considering plants to be minimally cognitive. Yeah, his Paco's lab is called the Minimum Intelligence something lab. No, the Minimal Intelligence Lab, period. And then he calls it MINT. That's it. I was trying to make the letters sound out, but that's not. It's what it is. Research on cognitive beings so different from human animals contributes to a broader, by the way, Paco doesn't just think they're minimally cognitive. That's what he has to say because it's all he can prove. But trust me, he thinks much more. Broader inquiry into intelligence in general may be helpful in searching for alien forms of intelligence of life. So by recognizing plants as the intelligent, cognizant, conscious beings that they are, this helps us recognize aliens. While this may be true, it may be true. I would say, though, the recognizing the intelligence in bacteria gets us a little closer too. But anyways, neither here nor there. Why do we have to go there in order to get to, anyway. Okay. Sex life of plants and botanical queerness. Are we getting to an exciting part? Although it has been known that plants have reproductive organs, it was not until Linnaeus proposed a so-called sexual system of botanical classification that this issue became so visible. I'm not even going to touch that comment. In his books, Species Plantarum, Linnaeus established a form of methodology based on a binary nomenclature to refer to the number of male and female sexual organs in flowers. Again, why are we classifying plants in the way that we would think of humans? I don't know. A plant's class was determined, how classy are they? Was determined by the number of stamen, male organs, and its order by the number of pistils, female organs. In order to make the controversial issue of what seemed perverse in plant sexuality more acceptable, because, talking about sexuality, sorry. Okay, let me reread this sentence. I'm going to try it over. In order to make the controversial issue of what seemed perverse in plant sexuality more acceptable, the perversity being the possibility of sex with more than one partner and with partners of the same sex. I'm speechless. Linnaeus adopted traditional wedding and marriage imagery. Do you see why I'm not a fan of Linnaeus? I can appreciate some of what he did. Kind of like Aristotle, though. He went way off the deep end. Like, seriously, wedding and marriage theory. He suggested that the flowers, leaves, serve as bridal beds, which the Creator has so gloriously arranged, adorned with such noble bed curtains, and perfumed with so many soft scents, that the bridegroom with his bride might there celebrate their nuptials with so much the greater solemnity. Those lascivious plants, Michelle says. Yes. Despite the conventional conservative vocabulary, Linnaeus' description exposed the fact that plant sexuality cannot be reduced to heterosexual unions of two partners, because in flowers, a female reproductive organ is often accompanied by numerous male reproductive organs, or in Linnaeus' terms, one wife resides in bed with numerous husbands, which is awesome since most harems are one man with so many other women. I love this. Reproductive organs, or in Linnaeus' terms, one wife resides in bed with numerous husbands, being either brothels or unrelated to each other. Oh, brothers, excuse me. See, brothels, that's where my mind was going. My mind was already going to the brothel. Being brothers or unrelated to each other. Needless to say, disclosing sexual relations of this kind was received with fierce hostility. How dare you? That is improper. Descriptions of plant sexuality that allegorize human sexuality reveal prevailing gender relations and especially attitudes towards women. Yes, it does. During his trip to Lapland in 1732, Linnaeus became particularly interested in a small plant he decided to call Andromeda. In his diary, Linnaeus recorded this. Does he fall in love with Andromeda? Anyway. Linnaeus recorded this encounter in the form of a drawing and a note that demonstrates. Is there a drawing? Oh my God, there's Andromeda's drawing. I forgot about this drawing. Here is Andromeda. Check out the beauty of Andromeda. I don't think you can see it. Oh, sorry. I like his attempts at animals. Anyway, and I like how the female is nude. Andromeda. That must have gone off. Where am I? Okay, sorry. Here we are. This is going to be interesting. And let's see. And a note that demonstrates the long-established association of women with plants. I noticed that she was blood red before flowering. but that as soon as she blooms, her petals become flesh-colored. I have so many comments I want to make right now. I'm holding myself back. Her beauty is preserved only so long as she remains a virgin, as often happens with women also, i.e., until she is fertilized, which will not now be so long as she is a bride. The vegetative and nutritive soul existing in the Western imagination since the time of Aristotle and linked with growth and reproduction was particularly associated with irrationality and women, resulting in their inferior position in the political life. I have to remember that was then, this is now. That was then, this is now. Elaine Miller explains that Western philosophers from Aristotle to Hegel have repeated the analogy of men to animals and women to plants by virtue of their perceived respective characteristics of activity, sexual activity most likely, and rationality on the one hand, and passivity and lack of rationality on the other. I should have put myself something stronger. It is for me the end of the day. And I feel like in order to do this justice, sometimes you need something a little stronger to wet the palate and allow that tongue. I don't need that. No, I can just say it. This is crap. I mean, it is a beautiful indication of what was happening in that time period. It is a sad indication of what was happening in that time period. It is crazy to think that we have thought about men and women in this way. His misogyny is showing. I agree. His misogyny is showing. His misogyny is showing. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Okay. This resulted in the association of women with flowers, both as a linguistic convention and an ontological conviction, linking femininity with a decorative status rather than any perceived or political force, which I would also argue is the reason why women have lost their wildness, this control, this ability. And if you think about it from the perspective of gardening and what ensues from there, it is all about control. I mean, come on, gardening is all about control. Let me control this for most people, not feral gardening, not all kinds of other new areas and techniques that are coming in, but traditional gardening from the perspective of an ornamental garden is all about control. It's all about, I set you here, I decide when you're going to flower, I make sure you have the right combination of color, I pull you out if you're not the right combination. These are all the elements of a garden, an ornamental garden, even in some cases, also a vegetable garden, but we're not going to go there right now. Sorry. Linking femininity with a decorative status rather than a practical or political force. Hence, passivity, purity, and fragility were praised as female virtues, and as such, flower women were treated as objects of male desire. Representing women as flowers ultimately reduced them to their seductive powers and reproductive functions. One of the best visual representation of this perception of women is Italian painter and printmaker Odardo Fialetti's Petal Venus, which depicts the dissected pregnant womb of a gorgeously unfurled bloom. This concept survived for centuries and was a rather common motif throughout 19th century visual culture. Moreover, historian of science from the University of Cambridge, Patricia Faras, points out that legacies of this erotic botanic intensity survive in words such as defloration, as well as in the contemporary visual appropriation of flowers in the paintings of American artist Georgia O'Keeffe and in American artist Judy Chicago's installation, The Dinner Party. We don't even realize how much we perpetuate these stereotypes. We really don't. We really don't. And I hope that as more of this understanding, this is why, remember at the beginning of the stream, I was saying, for those of you that are new here, live commentary is not just about scientific knowledge, but it is about the intersection between scientific knowledge, spiritual knowledge, and artistic knowledge around plants, because this all ties into the way we perceive ourselves as humans, as plants, as animals, as all the other ranges. It goes into the critical plant studies. It goes into all of the gender studies that we're talking about. This is the reason why these discussions are extremely important for us to understand. In a feminist context, acclaimed interdisciplinary thinker and Belgian-born feminist philosopher Luce, I don't even remember how I pronounced it last time. I did an entire paper, an interview with her. It was fantastic and super interesting, and I can't remember how I pronounced the name. Irigaray, has inquired into the ontological status of women being figuratively linked with plants and made an effort to positively rework the negative metaphor of woman flower, which in reality is not, I mean, flowers are tough. You should see the beauty. I can't show them to you right now, but the gorgeous flowers that are blooming right now in Jaina and Zan, the aloe plant, my aloe plant housemates, are gorgeous, are tough, are robust. None of this like frailty. Anyway, in Iriga's poetic writing, the figure of a flower, similar to that of lips, refers to the feminine subject and the concept of feminine intimacy. In her book, Elemental Passions, she refers to the petals of a flower touching each other as lips do in a caress. She distinguishes between becoming a flower on one's own and being forced to become a flower as a mode of masculine appropriation of femininity. Exactly. As she writes, "You want to make me into a flower? To become your flower?" But a woman has her own ways to become herself. She has her own roots to grow into herself, a message that Irigaray conveys by saying, "Before I knew you, already I was a flower. Must I forget that to become your flower? The one which is your destiny for me?" And the answer is no. Answer A, no. No, the sexual connotation of a flower is clear, but the model of feminine sexuality tailored to men's clouds what is actually hidden somewhere deeper, in the ground, all the way down to the roots. My petals swell with your vigor, itself nourished by my blood, but thus separated from their life's source. They are held open in an ideal permanence, so that, eternally fixed, I guarantee the concept of the flower for you. Now we're getting into something. The flower, however, touches the earth with its roots and exposes only the petals spreading and coming together. Woo, it's getting hot in here. Pointing out another layer of this writing on the flower woman, Miller suggests that as a result of Iriga's strategy, the plant moves from an analogy to woman to a metonym for women. Metonym? I don't remember all these words that we never remember how to pronounce. In other words, this strategy opens up space for a critique of the perception of woman as flower, or more importantly, the perception of flower as woman, and how we misconstrue flowers, and enables an empowering new concept of woman flower. Exactly. The latter represents femininity self-aware of its potential agency and erotic powers. The thing is, I don't have a problem with this, except that we have to remember that we can also be woman animal. I can be woman flower. I can be woman fungi. I can be woman like succulent. I can be woman anything. I can be feminine any of these. The interest in botanical queerness nowadays is focused mainly on plants themselves, and inquiries into their sex life provide refreshing inspiration in feminist thinking about the materiality of sexual relations in humans and non-human context. Like critical plant studies in general, then, a queer way of thinking about reproducing plant bodies, writes Aubrey Straight-Krug, calls attention to how plants and humans exist in transcorporeal relationships. Transcorporeality can be dangerous, but it can also be sustaining, and in any case, it is unavoidable. Canadian environmental scholar Catriona Sandilands, another one that is in a paper that we reviewed, like again, go back through all of the old archives in YouTube and on my and on my blog and in the Naturally Conscious community, because these live commentaries, we have done so many papers and they have been so good at helping us understand and explore these concepts in detail. Celebrates the notion of botanical queerness, which she believes may be helpful in thinking through the terms and concepts of queer theory. Exactly, because it gives us more context. It helps us understand definitions that we have yet to define, new ways of being, and it gives us a broader scope to pull from rather than the very limited scope and the belief that we are a simple novelty and therefore it is a fad or something that is going to pass quickly. Seriously going in and really understanding the breadth of not just the plant world, but also especially once you start getting into fungi and bacteria, it's going to blow your mind at the whole concept of sexuality and how limited we are in the way that we as human beings are experiencing it today. Rejecting efforts to see plants reduced to their interest of humans who instrumentalize them, she suggests inquiring into the intriguing sexual strategies of plants. The latter involve not just other plant species, but also wind, water, gravity, and animals. Plants developed pollinating strategies that involve insects lured to them most commonly by color, smell, and rewards, such as nectar and pollen. But some used the peculiar strategy of sexual mimicry, leading to a copulation with the deceived wasps and bees. Hundreds of orchid species produce flowers that attract insect pollinators by imitating the actual look of the sexual organs and sex pheromones of their potential mates. Did you ever stop to think, how is it that the plants know what those sexual organs look like? I'll let you ponder that one. As international group of artists and designers, including Pei-Yin Lin, Dimitri Stamatis, Yasmina Weiss, and Spela Petrich, I can't even pronounce it, but you got me. I tried. Working together on a project called Plant Sex Consultancy, PSX, have declared an interest to design methodologies to create augmentations for their vegetal clients, which supplement and enhance their natural reproductive strategies. They chose a number of plants for whom they intended to design body extensions and augmentations in an attempt to solve their sex-related problems. In strategic anthropomorphic gesture, the artists gave their plant clients voices to allow them to describe their problems. They have problems? The most important aspect of this work, however, is certainly its directing viewers' attention not only to the various reproductive strategies employed by flowering plants, but also to the fact that plants' reproductive functions are highly dependent on environmental conditions, as should ours probably, including anthropogenic pressures linked to domestication. One of the clients, the commonly known potted plant cyclamen, co-evolved with specific large bees that performed buzz pollination. This species, however, has gone extinct for unknown reasons. The cyclamen flower requires a specific large insect to shake it with a specific frequency, and scientific research suggests that although other insects visit the flower, they may not be successful in pollinating it. Therefore, the artist developed a vibrating pod with a sensor, which is designed to gently grasp the cyclamen flower. When triggered by a visiting insect, the pod shakes with the exact frequency needed to release the pollen onto the insect. The actual objects are something between a sex toy and a prosthesis compensating for a lost function. In this inquiry into plants' desires, we learn about adaptation, coevolution, and trans-species relations, as well as impact on the environment. I'm going to go see how many pages we have left because there's a part of me that wants to end here. I want to see how far down this goes. I am looking. Okay, summary. So we have until, what page is this? Oh, 15. Okay. So this is page 15 and we are on page 9. We're fine. Okay. Oop, sorry. Technologically augmented plants. Chimeras, cyborg plants, and plantoids. You know that plantoids is one of my favorite words. It's one of my favorite words. Okay, we have 6 more pages. I'm going to try to comment a little. I don't know. We'll see where we go. We'll see where we get to. Humans have always looked for ways to transform plants for their own needs. Instrumentalizing. Sorry, trying to make a little bit more space. Why does it do that? Instrumentalizing human-plant relations. Yet the domestication of plants may also be viewed as an exchange of benefits. The agricultural revolution around 12,500 years ago marked the beginning of social history. Okay, I just realized that. Hold on one second. I want to turn on a light. How do I do this? Oh, one second. I'll be right back. We're going a little bit longer than I expected. And so therefore, I'm just turning on some background light. Okay, the agricultural revolution around 12,500 years ago marked the beginning of a social history of civilization biotechnology, which leads to creating new life forms. The first domesticated plants, also called the Neolithic founder crops, included 3 cereals, 4 pulses, and flax, which were cultivated by the farming communities of the early Holocene in the Fertile Crescent, comprising Western Asia, the Nile Valley, and the Nile Delta. A scientific lab equipped with bioengineering tools has become the contemporary stage for the domestication of plants. Some of the results of plant technology entanglements include direct intervention on the molecular level, plant-computer interfaces, and inspiration drawn from plant body construction, resulting in chimeras, cyborg plants, and plantoids. For centuries, the separation of what grows by itself and what requires human intervention to grow was considered one of the fundamental divisions in forming Western ontology. For the record, what requires human intervention to grow is a human construct. In other words, nothing requires human intervention to grow. We chose to intervene into evolutionary steps that would have taken those plants in new direction. Now, I'm not saying that all of it is bad. I'm not also saying that all of it is good. I am just saying that I think some of these terms are mistaken. In physics, Aristotle, the founder of natural history, explains, we've already established we don't like Aristotle. If you planted a bed and the rotting wood acquired the power of sending up a shoot, it would not be a bed that would come up, but wood, which shows that the arrangement in accordance with the rules of the art is merely an accidental attribute, whereas the substance is the other, which further persists continuously through the process. I'm not even going to go there. With the help of bioengineering tools and methods, we are already capable of reprogramming biological systems to some degree. Interference, either for one generation or permanently, so that the change is carried on to future generations. I'm still not understanding whether or not the author of this thinks this is good or bad or just neutral. Genetically modified plants, including transgenic plants, are developed with specific features beneficial in agriculture. The word beneficial is still in debate. And to perform specific tasks such as functioning as chemical factories. With specific modification, they can produce vitamins, enzymes, proteins, pharmaceuticals, and other desired chemicals. This complies with the more general observation that biotechnology alters what is known as biological, and it is, as American Hannah Landecker claims, the specificity of life after biotechnology. Transgenic plants, or plant-related chimeras, are products of bioengineering capable of creating new plant species. I mean, okay, here's my problem with this. I'm just going to say it really clearly. I come from a body modification culture, for those of you that might not know. I have my own kinds of modifications done. I don't have any problem with modification, but the modification comes from my will. And I am not 100% sure. No, I am pretty much 100% sure that not all of the transgenic modifications done to plants are done with plant permission. Now, if you were to tell me, as was the case in traditional ecological knowledge, where there is a co-creation process of spreading seeds and of maybe taking cuttings and graftings and some other things that results in a new species, but that the human involved, I've lost my focus. Focus me. The human involved felt that there was a calling from the plants. I am okay with this because that is coevolution, and we as human beings evolve through this type of scientific development. But most of the time, that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. There is no plant involvement. These are guinea pig experiments, genetic experiments done on the plants. And for that, me no happy. Me no like. Transgenic plants or plant-related chimeras are products of bioengineering capable of creating new plant species, unattainable by traditional techniques of horticulture, such as deliberate cross-pollination, selective breeding, or grafting and budding. With genetic engineering enabling a transfer of genetic materials of one species to another, distant species can meet on a molecular level, which allows for transgenic organisms, such as plant-animal chimeras, to come into existence. Plants with animal genes have been successfully produced in commercial and academic biological laboratories, often to serve as bioreactors in production of biomolecules for pharmaceutical purposes. See what I mean about not having plant permission? Such organisms are not usually available for public viewing in natural history museums or scientific museums, and they do not in any way resemble mythological chimeras, whose bodies easily gave away their mixed species origins. Art, however, can provide the public with a glimpse into the current potential of bioengineering. Potential, is that the word you want to use? Are you sure about that? And encourage debate on the ontological and ethical aspects of such practices, as well as their future consequences. This is the intersection of art. The Brazilian-born and US-based artist Eduardo Cac's flowering plant called Edunia, belonging to the Natural History of Enigma series, is undoubtedly the most recognized contemporary living plant artwork. It is. This genetically engineered plantimal, as Cac proposed to name it, is a chimera of a petunia plant and the artist's genes. Remember how I was saying earlier about how I am having very mixed feelings? I love art. And I understand that we need to kill plants for paper, for arts, and certain pigments come from, ground up plants. But I don't know. I think this is another area of discussion that we need to have. There is an entire redefining. Again, it's about permission and relationship. And I just don't feel like we're there. I feel like we've lost the train. It explores in an art context the technological potential for creating new species contributing to the post-natural rather than natural history of plants and humans meeting on the molecular level. On the one hand, this ambivalent art project demonstrates that plants and humans, though they are so very different, are related and share a basic biology that enables creation of chimeras. The project therefore alerts its viewers that the newly created species requires ethical considerations and hospitality. Yes, it does. Like, should you do it? Remember, plants as mentors, models, and measure. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. On the other hand, the work points out that humans, with their anthropocentric convictions and with the aid of technology, are ready to influence or even infect, I'm going with the latter word, any other living being on the molecular level with their own genes in order to pursue their own goals. Exactly. Cyborg plants, or plantborgs, are no longer solely the inhabitants of science fiction. As hybrids of machines and organisms, to recall Haraway's 1985 definition, cyborgs are brought to life, assembled in labs, and invested with a hope that they might help in the fight against environmental pollution and climate change. Maybe we should just stop polluting. Have you thought about that? It's just an idea, just a thought. Cyborg plants are a focus in a scientific project called Pleased. Ooh, I haven't seen the Pleased project in so long. I wonder if it's still around. You can look it up. It's pretty, which aims to use communities of plants, such as forests and meadows, as sensing and decision-making devices. Let me just tell you that plants are already sensing and decision-making beings. Why do we? In the future, because they are much more sensitive and sophisticated and operate as networks, plants are expected to replace the artificial devices used now to monitor chosen environmental parameters. Why don't we just listen to the plants? Because we don't have to hook them anyway. So far, the project focuses on humidity and temperature, both measuring the electrical signals emitted by plants in response to environmental changes, and actually decoding these signals are the greatest challenges to scientists currently. Plant communicators in the room were like, really? One day, we may be able to understand how and what the forest is communicating. A plantoid, analogically to Android, is a plant-inspired self-growing robot. Oh, this is Mancuso was working on a project of this sort, with the ability to absorb materials from the surrounding environment. It can build its own structure as a mode of self-movement. The plantoid resemble plant roots. Yeah, this is the one that Mazzalawi and Mazzolai, is that her name? I don't remember her name. And Mancuso were working on. It was also for the European Space Agency. The plantoid resembles a plant roots, but at least at this point, cannot be mistaken for them. Vegetal bodies have come under scrutiny of engineers because the architecture of their body and their physiological attitudes make plants an unlimited source of inspiration for robotic scientists. True. And especially because the modularity, reiteration, and evolved sensing systems are among the most important problems of today's robotics. Mazzolai, there it is. Although plantoids are still a rare artificial species to encounter, only prototypes have been constructed, they mimic plant roots in their ability to sense and exercise a distributed intelligence. They are meant to operate underground, performing tasks such as soil penetration, and perhaps one day will be used in medical procedures as flexible surgical tools, which does make sense. But this is a form of biomimicry. This is not me destroying a plant or killing a plant. This is me learning from plant's example to create something that works better. Because if I'm going to create a rover for Mars, doesn't it make sense that plants know how to understand an environment faster than any kind of machine operating over the environment? Whereas plant cyborgs, together with plantoids, are rare and evoke curiosity rather than controversy, genetically modified plants, which are much more common, are viewed by activists as products of biopiracy. Yes, as an act of dominating nature for commercial purposes, and are met with criticism and resistance. I would agree with that. Indian ecofeminist and activist Vandana Shiva, writing in Biopiracy, The Plunder of Nature and Knowledge, suggests that biopiracy is actually a continuation of the colonizing practices of invasion and exploitation, designed to support the further accumulation of capital in the West. Can I argue? In her view, the new colonies are the interior spaces of their bodies of women, plants, and animals. Resistance to biopiracy is a resistance to the ultimate colonization of life itself, of the future of evolution, as well as of the future of non-Western traditions of relating to and know nature. If we don't start having some ethical conversations, if we don't start really bringing the plants into these conversations, we are going to get ourselves into a world of hurt. We're already in a world of hurt. My point exactly. As plants can be designed to be sterile, which is common in genetically altered crops that are engineered to produce dead seeds. Can you imagine if we were to say that? Yes, you can give, we are going to allow you to give birth to your child, but from now on your children will be sterile. We wouldn't. The biotechnological revolution, by depriving seeds of their self-regenerative powers, is viewed by Shiva as another unfolding of the colonization of seeds, colonization of plants, colonization of the very beings that create our existence. We're going to screw ourselves over so bad, both through the use of technologies and through property rights. Selling seeds producing sterile plants ensures farmers need to purchase new seeds every year. But not only that, it takes away the rights of the plants. Can we talk about this as a plants' right issue? Plants in future environments, Earth and beyond. Plants do not need animals, including human animals, to survive, whereas animals cannot survive with plants. I am glad that they finally said this out loud and clearly. It is a capitalist thing. I'm agreeing with you, Michelle. It's a capitalist thing. They directly or indirectly produce all the food consumed by animals and link heterotrophs with the sun, the planet's main source of energy. Food, energy, and the environment have been pronounced as three dominions posing major challenges for humans. Because, that's what's posing the challenge for humans. How about if humans are actually posing the challenge for humans in the 21st century? And then, anyway, vis-a-vis growing human population, human population, climate change, and environmental devastation. And whose faults are this? I would even say that even if you were to say, which I do say to a certain extent, that some of the climate change is actually natural, because it is normal for the climate to change, our inability to adapt is our own problem to solve. Not modifying the environment externally to us. We need to do it ourselves. We need to. Donna Haraway, for whom the current geological period of the Anthropocene is an event after which nothing will be the same, warns that the edge of extinction is not just a metaphor. System collapse is not a thriller. However, recent studies suggest that plants are more resilient to events leading to extinction than animals. This is also of interest to Canadian artist Oliver Kellhammer, whose project Neocene, I haven't heard that one, refers to climate change, especially global warming, and focuses on those plant species that lived through several geological periods and are still around. Kellhammer's goal is to recreate forests of the distant geological epoch Eocene, connecting the deep past with the future by planting trees such as metasequoia, sequoia, and ginkgo in what is now Canada, an area these species are known from fossil records to have populated in the past. Yeah, but the temperature in Canada is not the same as it was back then. I think we'd have to move it. Anyways, it's still a good idea. The EOC here provides a point of reference, as it was a geological epoch that started with a dramatic warming of the climate about 55.8 million years ago, when even the polar regions were inhabited by warm weather species of plants. Okay, now this makes more sense. I like this idea. The metasequoia, because see, this is about adaptation, but we shouldn't be worrying. We should be asking ourselves. We should be looking at Neanderthal or species Neanderthalis and species that of Homo that may have lived through some of these periods, or who may have lived through similar kinds of periods, to see what is it that we in our own human structure need to change. For sure, having the right plants to co-evolve with during that period could be helpful. The metasequoia, or Dawn redwood, one of Kellhammer's botanical choices, is among the greatest botanical finds of the 20th century. It was believed to be extinct until the 1940s, and until then had been known only from fossils. Similar to ginkgo trees, which persisted in another part of China, a small population of metasequoia trees survived in the forests of central China and were revived by Buddhist monks, who cultivated them in their gardens. In anticipation of significant global warming, the artist wants to reintroduce these trees back into the Northern Hemisphere environments on the premise that, because these species were prevalent during the Eocene thermal maximum, they may be suited for the hot climate to come. And I'm curious that if we start to re-relate to these types of plants, if we start to have a relationship with metasequoia, how could we and our physiology change in order to better adapt to these types of conditions? If we did it with conscious intent, would it take us into a new level of evolution even for humans? That's my question to you. Not only may they prove to be very adaptable, but they may also be the ones that will take over the territories vacated by species that will go extinct. Yet the future climate and its impact on Kellhammer's young deep time forest, consisting in part of living fossils, is impossible to predict. The Neo-Eocene is unknown, but as recent research suggests, mass extinction events affecting plants create opportunities for renewal of biodiversity. Owing to global warming, the future may belong to those species that have already proved able to deal with similar conditions. And more importantly, if we allow them to evolve, Where will they evolve to? Will they evolve following the direction of this new climate? And where will that take us? That's, to me, super interesting. The future environment of plants may also be elsewhere in the earth. So far, the only non-terrestrial environments where plants have been grown has been within space stations. Well, yeah, or on the outside of certain spaceships, but that only lasted for a few days. This is a highly technologically controlled environment in which plants grow without soil. You do realize that the fact that we even have this idea is most likely because the plants have already seeded the idea that they need to go to another planet and conquer that. Just an idea. While this may not seem like a difficult obstacle to overcome, this is a highly technological controlled environment in which plants grow without soil. While this may not seem like a difficult obstacle to overcome, as we already have hydroponic and aeroponic farms operating on the planet's surface, for earthbound life forms, being away from the earth posits the problem of orientation. Gravitropism, a plant's response to gravity, is positive in roots, which grows down, and negative in shoots, which grows up. Plants, however, can cope even with microgravity. You should go see that. It's really interesting. My Mancuso has actually worked on European Space Station projects relating to this, and Mancuso's team from the International Laboratory for Plant Neurobiology. It's really quite interesting. A condition of weightlessness that have never encountered in their evolutionary development, or so you say. But we don't actually know. 470 million years ago, we weren't here. We don't know how strong the gravitational pull was. But either so, if anybody can adapt plants in. The first plant to bloom away from the earth was Arabidopsis thaliana, the world's most lab-adapted plant in the world. It's a favorite common, it says it here, the most common lab plant. On board the Soviet space station Salyut 7 in 1982, which paved the way for further successful experiments with edible plants in space. Selecting or even modifying plants and eventually taking them on longer cosmic journey may also be seen as giving them a territorial advantage. They already inhabit the International Space Station, and their presence will certainly increase in the future, both physically and mentally, benefiting the human crew. What about thinking about what might benefit the plants? Just a thought. The first benefit concerns the need to produce food on long journeys. Again, the benefit to plants should be number one. The second is for psychological comfort and relaxation, aspects that should not be underestimated. Definitely not if you're going to be up in space. Man, I don't know if I could do it. Settling on Mars or other planets requires the availability of sustainable food sources. Cultivating plants in native soil seems to be, so far, the best option. The results of experiments investigating the possibility of growing plants in Martian and lunar soils shows that plants can adapt, given the assumption that plant cultivation will be carried out in close surroundings with Earth-like light and atmospheric conditions. Let me just tell you something about plants. They will probably adapt even in lunar and Martian conditions. Just give them a little time. Give kin a little time. For humans, then, taking plants into space is a necessity that is intentionally implemented, while the plants are just taking a ride and perhaps a great evolutionary chance at the same time. Human-plant ethics. We're finally getting into ethics. Plants have been excluded from moral consideration as insensitive and inanimate beings. Thank you, Aristotle. This exclusion is a result of zoocentric perspectives that wrongly maintain a hierarchy of living beings in which plants occupy the lowest position. Again, Aristotle. Matthew Hall, arguing for a change in attitudes towards plants, explains that perceiving and relating to them as passive resources is outdated and rests ultimately on inadequate observations. Only recently, following scientific evidence of plants' sophisticated responses to changing environmental conditions and an acknowledgement of their basic cognitive abilities, has a plant's ethics been put forth by plant biologists, philosophers, and environmental activists. Didn't I say this a little while ago? I said that earlier in the stream. We need to start thinking about plant ethics, and we need to have a consideration, a transdisciplinary grouping of individuals to start talking about these things, because it's not going to come from just one of the sciences, like one of the disciplines. It just can't. It can't. It'll be It'll just be a continuation of what we already have. And yet, as mentioned previously, and how can we even have this conversation until we finish the conversation on consciousness? We need to get to wide acceptance of consciousness in order for them to be ethical considerations, because if not, the ethical considerations are always going to be limited. Anyway. As mentioned previously, a better understanding of plants as biological systems had led to further instrumentalization of them. Exactly. We're not like giving plants a better life. We're instead learning how to manipulate them even more. In other words, while there has been little respect for plants and limited knowledge of their sophisticated lifestyles, new knowledge is merely opening up new ways to utilize plant bodies. Confronted with this predicament in 2008, the Swiss Federal Ethics Committee on Non-Human Biotechnology published a document entitled The Dignity of Living Beings with Regard to Plants, Moral Considerations of Plants for Their Own Sake. Totally worth a read. The committee explained that dignity is understood as the inherent worth, good on its own and own interests. Therefore, if something has inherent worth, this means it has something which we also call dignity. A being that has inherent worth, therefore, counts morally for its own sake. A being has a good of its own. I'm glad they call being, because we use being in NCC at Sprouts. We use being, and being is a good word. Has a good of its own. Good of its own. If one can do good or bad things to it, i.e., if the being can be injured. This is a lot of the discussion that's coming up in the whole law and society discussion around plants too, which is when it comes to other types of beings, if we think the being experiences hurt, pain, and negative consequences of our use, we immediately stop the use. But when it comes to plants, it's the opposite. We need to prove it before we are going to stop. I told you at the very beginning, the conversations we really need to be having, we're just at the surface of, which is all these ethical considerations. And they're not easy because our entire world has been built upon and predicated upon the idea that we can do with plants whatever we wish. Rather predictably, the Swiss report caused a major controversy among scientists, humanities scholars, and the general public. The response from scientists were contradictory, with strong voices against awarding rights to plants, which could supposedly halt scientific development as well as enthusiasm and hope. The discussion of their rights is only beginning, Stefano Mancuso and Alessandra Viola state, but it can't be put off any longer. Hall assumes a more moderate position, arguing for relationships of care and responsibility rather than opting for legal standing. And I understand Hall's consideration here because, again, the plant body is not the same as a human body. And therefore, we need to have these conversations with the plants in order to understand how the plants themselves want to be used or how they want to co-create with us, which sometimes means giving up kin's body. Rather than he considers it to be more important to build awareness that, like other living beings, plants actively live and seek to flourish. Within the humanities, conservative voices see in plant rights an act of diminishing of human superiority status. Yes. This is true. This is exactly what we're trying to do. Post-humanist thinkers are also reluctant to grant rights to plants, as this gesture is seen as another paternalistic move that merely preserves the anthropocentric tradition of inclusions and exclusions based on presupposed hierarchies. Netherlands-based feminist philosopher Rosie Braidotti, writing in The Posthuman, identifies such attitudes as compensatory humanism and calls for a more critical approach to humanism, noting that in this cross-species embrace, humanism is actually being reinstated uncritically under the aegis of species egalitarianism. In other words, granting rights to non-humans is a manifestation of post-anthropocentric neo-humanism, which has come about as compensatory efforts in environmental crisis and taken the form of solidarity between humans and non-human others. It does not offer any re-imaging of human, non-human ontological positions and relations. Agreed. We need to redefine this. We need to create a new relationship, a new paradigm, a new level of understanding, which can only happen by bringing the plants into the conversation. We cannot just assume our current laws and our current way of looking at things that work for humans are going to work for plants. I am all for plant rights, but I feel like plant rights should be plant specific. And the plants are the only ones that can tell us what exactly those rights should look like. Is any activism or politics concerning plants possible at all? Perhaps Plumwood, for whom the extension of no harm policies to sentient animals only, as proposed by Australian philosopher and bioethicist Peter Singer in 1973, was not radical enough, offers such a possibility. She has called for moral consideration of all non-humans. Plumwood believes that the ability to apply ethical concepts to earth others, interesting, is largely a matter of concept formation and of individuating in appropriate ways in terms of discerning others as autonomous, intentional systems rather than in terms of instrumental and mechanistic systems of individualization. I'm with you on that. She calls for a less arrogant and therefore less anthropocentric attitude towards non-human others, which is possible by adopting an intentional stance in which we do not deal with them strictly on our own terms. And this is the difficulty. We have to enter into the plant mind in order to understand the plant's needs. We have to develop this vocabulary. Earth others can be seen not as objects for manipulation, but as other nations of roots or wings or legs, nations we must meet on their own terms as well as ours. This opens up the possibility of ethics and politics shaped in terms of a response to others' needs, ends, directions, and meanings. Plumwood, however, does not argue for giving plants the status of subjects as non-humans interact with each other without any recognition of status, as could be expected in a fully intersubjective relation. Where am I? Oh, sorry. Interesting. Following the plants. Few feminists have said anything about plants, although there are exceptions, including those who, in one way or another, have suggested following plants. But in what way could we actually follow plants? Is following plants possible, and is it at all desirable? In other words, and more precisely, what is the image of plants we want to follow, which employed metaphorics are desirable? Throughout the history of Western philosophy, plants with their specific modes of existence were figuratively associated with specific modes of being in the world and modes of knowledge production. We're tired of trees. We should stop believing in trees, roots, and radicals. French philosophers Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari declared in A Thousand Plateaus, exposing that both the verticality of a tree trunk and its root represented not only traditional Western affinity for genealogy, continuity, and accumulation, but also traditional hierarchies of binary logic. Can I tell you that I'm a bit with the tree thing is a little over. I mean, sorry, Gary the Silver Firm looked me. I felt the tap. I love you and I love trees, but you are a plant. I love all plants. Okay. Instead, the philosophers have proposed the figure of a rhizome, a subterranean stem that stands for multiplicity, grows horizontally, has no center, and is neither limited nor predictable. I like this. Feminist theories in the 1990s picked up the figure of the rhizome as critical towards phallocentric culture and patriarchal representational models. Sorry, Gary. Praising its openness to interconnectivity and heterogeneity, as this would better suit inquiries into sexual identity, subjectivity, and corporeal beings. Now, in times of environmental crisis, it is more urgent, challenging, and exciting to invest in the transformative powers of plant thinking and possibly turn to real plants. Michael Marder, in his book, Plant Thinking, The Philosophy of Vegetal Life, asks what plant thinking can do for living beings. This is what I have been saying all along. I mean, granted, he started it earlier than I did. I mean, I started around 2013, but he was already an expert by 2013. I was a novice in 2013. But I got there, which is, what can plant thinking do if we were to exit our humanness for a second, enter into our inner plantness, and then re-enter into humanness from that awareness of plantness? how different would our thinking be? How much would we better understand what it means to be an embodied human? So interesting. Let's see. An American cultural theorist, Jeffrey T. Nealon, in Plant Theory, Biopower and Vegetal Life, why do I not know this book? Wants to know what, if anything, changes in our present humanity's debates about animal studies and biopower, if we take vegetal life into account and if we take plants to be linchpin for thinking about biopolitics. Biopolitics, the inclusion of biological life in the mechanisms of power, as well as the control apparatus exerted over biological lives, usually concerns humans and more recently also animals. The introduction of biopolitics of vegetable life, vegetal, I thought it would be vegetal, life would not only extend the territory of life into the vegetal realm and call for rethinking the question of life itself, but also point to a different mode of operation of plant life based on interconnectivity and distributiveness. Exactly. We cannot apply human animal thinking. We need to think plant. We need to enter into that plant mind. Plant thinking similarly has the potential to transform the realms of politics, but more important, that of ethics. Yet how can the principle of dense interconnectivity be extended by feminist theories into plant bodies, behaviors, and sexualities? Irigaray, in Elemental Passions, doubts that she, as a woman, could ever abandon her love of the vegetal and wonders if a man would become plant. As a female practice of becoming flower for herself and for a man actually concerns humans only, becoming with plants, not only on human terms, is now the real challenge. This is because, as Haraway suggests, when species meet, the question of how to inherit histories is pressing, and how to get together is at stake. We then urgently need to reinvent human-plant relations through the materialities of animal and plant bodies, metabolic systems, energy, and time, including the geological past and future, as well as through technologies fusing and appropriating and mirroring our bodies with those of plants. This is what I call inner plantness. This is this. Coevolution is never finished. And although humans seem to forget that, and on the contrary, might even be accelerating, allowing interconnectivity far beyond what has ever been imagined and researched. As a side note here, very quick, I was having a conversation with somebody who is talking to me about an experimentation that she's doing around a green DNA and around the fusion between human and plant DNA to another level, or better said, an awakening of plant DNA within the human. Oh, it's so another topic for another day, but so fascinating. Plants energizing the earth connect us, terrestrial animals, to the source of cosmic energy and offering a sensitivity and communication beyond individuality. With the growing body of knowledge on plant lives, we are only beginning to understand what it means to be a plant. As Swiss biologist and environmental activist Florine Cochelin points out, perhaps this trope of efflorescence may be yet another way of explaining being together in nature cultures, or biocivilizations, as somebody else would call them. Plants, summary. Plants being in the world has rarely been addressed by feminist theories, but topics such as the vegetative soul's association with femininities, plant bodies, radical otherness as a cause for their exclusion from ethics and biopolitics, the peculiar sex life of plants as inspiration for human non-heteronormative practices, becoming plant flower and becoming with plants are among those that have been considered. And very well, I might add. I feel like there's a really nice roundness in this paper. Humans' instrumental relationship with plants based on the traditional hierarchy between the human and the non-human is giving way to possibilities for activism and eco-justice, especially vis-a-vis techno-scientific developments such as molecular interventions into plant bodies. I don't think that that's a positive. That's not activism and eco-justice. That's no. The eco-justice is us thinking like plants to reach plantness and to then be able to co-live in this planet with plants being plants, microbes being microbes, fungi being fungi, and humans being humans, and none of us trampling on each other's rights or desires or abilities. That's what we're looking at. Contemporary transdisciplinary plant research, which is critical plant studies, acknowledges the most recent empirical evidence from plant biology of plants' sophisticated ways of going about their lives, which challenges traditional zoocentric perceptions of plants as passive objects. An awareness of plants' specific sensitivity and intelligence, which enables them to realize their own survival strategies, can no longer be ignored in feminist theories. Both learning about plants and learning from plants and learning like plants, I'm going to add, opens up territories and perspectives as yet unknown and hardly ever imagined. Wow. There was a lot there. Holy crud, we've been going for 2 hours. There was definitely a lot there. Wow. Okay. So why do they name it so badly? Just plant research. In this document, this edition, I guess it's a journal, Gender Nature. Why? They needed to give this a really good title, a really good name. Well, I hope that you enjoy this. I think that their summary, in my opinion, was extremely limiting. But I understand that in order for them to have written a complete, robust summary would have captured everything, and there was so much there. But ultimately, what we're talking about is the idea of we need to explore plant as plant, right? We need to better understand the intelligent and sensitive behavior of plants and allow this to inform our own human development, because we evolved from plants, as well as what can evolve in these times, what can become of us, and where should we take this relationship with plants? What would be the correct ethical considerations and the best behaviors for the plant as plants, now that we're recognizing that plants have their own way of being and thinking? So there was a lot there. We went a whole full 2 hours. I'm shocked. I will be publishing this as soon as everything renders up. I'm still trying to understand. I am extremely excited about hearing your thoughts on this as this percolates through you. Remember that you can comment here where you're seeing this, and always, always in the Naturally Conscious community, which is just tigreagardenia.com/NCC. I'll be putting it into the show notes. That is the place where we're having these types of discussions at a theoretical level, kind of like what we read here, but also on why is it not? We're also having these conversations. I don't know why the focus goes out. Also on a more day-to-day level, this is the place where we're experimenting and playing and experiencing and sharing ideas and thoughts about how do we put into practice everything that we just experienced, and how do we change our lives in order for us ourselves to flourish like a plant, for us to be able to easily adapt to changing conditions, to be able to be in full awareness and in consciousness and make conscious decisions. All of these things that plants really teach us how to do. And then how do we become good co-creators, and how do we become the kind of beings that can usher in a new paradigm where humans, plants, and other beings and all kinds of other kin are working together for the betterment of all of our systems and our planetary experiences. So thank you so much for being here with us, with me, and for all of your thoughts and your comments. And I look forward to the next time. That's me, Tigrea Gardenia. Remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. We will talk again very soon. Bye.